It's fun to have celebrity footballers who create magical moments with stunning skill and a great vision. They give us moments that remain in our minds even long after the game is over. However, I've been looking at the history of the sport, and the data keep pointing to something that's kind of bittersweet. And that's because I found that teams built around one star player have a surprisingly poor record at World Cups. Of course, not always, right? Not all the time, but consistently enough that it caught the attention of organizational psychologists. As we move forward in this exploration, I want you to bear in mind that this goes beyond football and it involves how people generally function in a group with a superstar. The relationship between individual brilliance and team success is one of the most studied questions in sports science, and what keeps emerging from that research across multiple sports and multiple decades runs counter to almost everything popular culture tells us about how greatness works. Let's look at the World Cup specifically because it gives us a clean and comparable data set. Ronaldo, for example, has won almost everything at club level: multiple Champions League titles, domestic league across three countries, and individual awards that confirm him as one of the most gifted players the sport has ever seen. But his record with Portugal at World Cups is a quarterfinal at best. On the other side, Messi's story is a little bit complicated because he did eventually win in 2022. However, when you look at the years before, that is 2006, 2010, 2014, and 2018, you find that Argentina consistently assembled rosters designed to give him the ball in the best possible positions. They built systems around him, yet they consistently fell short. The 2014 final was perhaps the starkest version of this. A team that existed almost entirely to service one player who by the final was visibly carrying the weight of being the only reason anyone believed they could win. And then there's Maradona, who almost single-handedly won in 1986, which seems to contradict everything I'm saying right now, except that by 1990 and 1994, as his teammates grew less capable around him, the story became different. The pattern that keeps emerging across the tournament history is this: the teams that often wins the World Cup tend to be ones where you can't immediately name the single most important player. So why? Why would having the best individual player in the world be in some circumstances a disadvantage? The first reason is tactical, and it's kind of straightforward. When a team is built around one player, the opposition knows it. Every team that faces Argentina knows where Argentina's danger comes from. And at a World Cup where every opponent has had weeks, even sometimes months, to prepare, a plan that depends on one predictable source of danger is easier to neutralize than a team where the threat can come from anywhere. The second reason comes from organizational psychology. A researcher named Anita Woolley at Carnegie Mellon University led a major study into what she called collective intelligence. That is, the capacity of a group to perform well across different kinds of tasks. And what her team found was that the collective intelligence of a group was not predictable by having the smartest individual in the room. Groups with one very high performer and several average ones consistently underperformed groups where intelligence and contribution were more evenly distributed. The reason she found was partly about communication. When one person dominates, others disengages, and also partly about social sensitivity. It is the ability of each member of the group to read the state of the others and to respond in real time. In a football contest, what that means is a team where every player is reading and responding to every other player. It is more capable, more resilient, and harder to predict than a team where everyone is waiting to serve one person. Let me put it another way. The superstar team is optimized for the superstar to shine, while the collective team is optimized for the team to win. You see the difference? Now, here's the proof. The teams that have won World Cups in the modern era are almost a perfect illustration of this. Spain between 2008 and 2012, probably the most dominant international team of the modern era. When you ask someone who the star was, you get names like Xavi, Iniesta, Silva, Villa, Puyol, Casillas. The football they played was specifically designed to make it impossible to isolate any single threat because the threat was everywhere simultaneously, and this made it hard for other teams to play them. France in 2018, technically you would say they had Mbappe, who became the story of the tournament, but the team that actually won matches was Kante, Varane, Griezmann. It was a defensive system so collectively organized that even when France weren't playing well, they still were nearly impossible to beat. Germany in 2014 had Müller, Neuer, and Kroos. No one player was the answer. The whole team was the answer, and they beat Brazil 7-1 in a semi-final. Not because of one player, but because of a collective system that was wholly capable. And now we've seen the same pattern with Spain winning this year's World Cup. Yes, Yamin Lamar stood out the most, but we also saw Cucurella, we saw Rodri, and many others. And let's be honest, the entire Spain team was on fire for this World Cup. Remember I said this wasn't only about football. Research into corporate performance consistently shows that companies with one dominant, irreplaceable leader, that is, the one who is the visionary, who makes all the significant decisions, are significantly more fragile than companies where leadership and decision making are equally distributed across the team. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the popular narrative was that one genius saved a company. And there's truth to that. But when you look closely, you'd see that Steve Jobs actually built a team. Johnny Ive was for design, and Tim Cook took over operations. They became a small group of people, each extraordinary in their specific domain, working in a system where the collective output consistently exceeded what any single one of them could have produced alone. And the moment Steve Jobs was no longer there, the system kept running because it had never been solely dependent on him. The companies that collapse when their founder leaves, the sports teams that crumble when their star gets injured, and the creative groups that fall apart when their most visible member departs, all share the same structural fragility. They were built around a single point of indispensable genius, rather than a collective capacity that could deal with any possible threat. Here is something of note though. In the business world, the collapse of a superstar dependent system often takes years to become apparent. But at a World Cup, you usually know by the quarterfinal. I want to be honest about something here before I end this video. The superstar isn't the problem. Ronaldo isn't a liability and Messi isn't a weakness. Individual genius is real and it's worth celebrating. And at their best, these players do things on football pitch that feel impossible. The problem isn't the star per se. The problem is what happens to the system around the star. Whether the team is built in a way that makes everyone better or in a way that turns everyone into support staff for one person. I guess what I'm trying to say is this. One player being exceptional is impressive and could sometimes take a team far. But 10 players being collectively exceptional is beyond impressive, and usually they take the team all the way. So you see, nothing is as ordinary as it looks. And with that, I'll end the video here. I'm Judge Blue Kelly. Until I see you in the next one, stay blessed.